So that's just one small example. What I want to do with the rest of this time is just share with you 3 lessons I've learned as I've been working on a lot of these kinds of projects, inviting visitors to co-create exhibits, to be part of the museum work in the process, because I want to be clear that I was about to say I'm not a hippie, but I am a hippie. I live off the grid in California. But when it comes to this stuff, and part of my training at the Spy Museum made me very clear that our job is not to make people feel good. It's not to create community galleries that are nice for the people who participated with them, but for everybody else look like, a junky version of the museum. To me, the goal is to use participation to make the institution as a whole better for every visitor who comes in the door. And so in that mind, I'm offering these lessons I've learned. The first is the most important to me, and it's very simple. When you invite people to participate, start with something you genuinely need. Instead of thinking, what could I invite visitors to do, or what might they like to do, think about, how could visitors help me in my job? What do I need that they can give? Because a problem with participation happens when you don't start with this, and this is that problem. This is a picture, a comic book from the Auckland Museum. I was walking around with some staff members, and they pointed to this, and they said, see, Nina, when we invite people to participate, this is what they do. This is not exactly making the museum better. I agree. This is not making the museum better. But I think that this comic book was not put out in a sense of genuine need for these comments. If they genuinely wanted visitors' comments, they would not have put out a wedding registry book. I'm serious about this. I think that when we think about what we do with design, when we're designing an exhibit about something we love, we're very careful to think about what materials, what light, how are we going to set this up to tell the story we want to tell. And comparably, if we're going to say, I really need stories from visitors who've had this experience, or who have this expertise, or are interested in this topic, we have to think comparably about, how do I design that space to communicate that this is a genuine interest of the institution and not a throwaway activity. And so this is the design question that I always start participatory projects with. How can visitors make this project better? How can they make this exhibit better? How can they make this program better? And there are lots of different versions of this. This is an image from the Oakland Museum of California. It's the State Museum for California. And they have a space in their permanent history gallery where they're always putting up signs like this that say things like, we're developing an exhibit about the California-Mexico border, blah, 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 and then asks all these questions. Has your life been affected? Do you know anybody who? And they're following up with these people. They're using this as a source of ongoing exhibit development research, and they're not doing it. They are also doing focus groups and advisory panels, but they also, on a day-to-day basis, are saying, these are visitors walking through the door. Do they have something to offer? Can they help us with the work we're engaged in right now? Visitors can also contribute objects. This is a picture from the National Ceramics Museum in the Netherlands. They did an exhibition last year called Shards and Happiness. It was about wedding china. And I don't know about you, I'm not exactly a ceramics museum person. To me, it's just like a bunch of plates. But they realized that, and they realized that the people who are on staff there are really passionate about the position that that part of our material culture has in our personal lives. And they realized, you know what, if we're going to do something about wedding china, we need to connect to the celebrations and the experiences people have with these kinds of objects in their own lives. So they put out a call, and they invited Dutch people from across the country to bring in their own wedding china, along with photographs from those celebrations, helping people, helping the next visitors make a more personal connection to this idea that it's not just plates behind glass. These are connected to personal stories, and hey, you have personal stories like this in a material culture like this as well. It's not just about visitors contributing stuff or contributing to new exhibits. This is a picture from the collections, an open storage area at the Smithsonian American Art Museum called the Luce Foundation Center. They have this very simple low-tech project going on called Fill the Gap. Basically, they have, these big shelves of open collection storage, and when an object goes out on display or for conservation, they put out this easel and they say, here's the spot we need filled, here are some objects that are about the right size, which ones do you think we should put in? And people can vote, and they can make decisions, and then they put it in. Now, this is a good example of a kind of project that raises a paradox or an irony about these kinds of ideas of visitors making the museum better. Because the woman who ran this project, Georgina Goodlander, said to me, Nina, it's not like visitors are making this easier or faster for us. We could much more quickly choose another object to go in this storage than we could do this whole rigmarole with the easel. And the reality is that it's not like the visitors are doing any serious work. This is more like an activity for them. But we talked about the fact that what it's also doing is inviting visitors to understand something that at a fundamental level I think a lot of people don't understand about collections, which is that they move around and that there are more of them behind the doors than are just on display. And that this idea that you can be involved to some extent in a small way in the process of figuring out what's going to go here, how do we make aesthetic decisions about what fits, and where do these things go, helps expose that conversation about what happens behind the scenes. Perhaps the best example of this kind of paradox of visitors helping but not helping in a strict staff way comes from the Holocaust Museum. This is an online project that I think is really phenomenal. It's called Children of the Lodz Ghetto. It's a research project. What happened was this. The Holocaust Museum received an artifact. It's an album of children's signatures from the Lodz Ghetto from before the war really got going. And what they did is they decided, okay, instead of putting this in our regular research queue, we're going to create an online database system that invites regular people to help us do the research to find out what happened to these students. Now, you don't need to be a PhD in history to do this. The activity that people are doing is searching for various spellings and misspellings of these names against various Holocaust-related databases, lists of people who are in certain camps or certain towns, things like that. And so they've opened up this portal and invited people to help do the real research on these names. Now, the reality is, again, that the visitors are in no way faster or better than professionals. In fact, less than half of the data that's been logged so far by visitors has been validated as authentic or accurate data. But the reason they do this is not just to get work out of visitors. It's to achieve their fundamental mission as an institution. And when they did their alpha testing, this was one of the quotes that came in from a student who'd been involved, who said, instead of hiring a group of researchers to do this work, it was a great idea having us do the work. Not only did we learn about these children, we were able to get personally involved. And this person goes on, as other people do, to say things like, I started thinking about the Holocaust not just in terms of numbers, but in terms of real people and real stories. People also said things like, I never knew that historical research would work this way, and I loved getting to have peer review. I liked it when the museum told me when I did something wrong, and I could figure out a way to improve. So by doing this project, it wasn't like the museum was saying, hey, here's some work we need to get done. Oh, maybe visitors can just do this for us. Instead, it's saying, what's a piece that we could expose and invite visitors to be part of, and how can that contribute to the way that we educate people, the way that they understand the work that goes on here, and the way we can spread the kinds of ways we engage people here. And the analogy I love to use around this is cooking with children. How many people will cook with a child this weekend? Okay, great. I think we're all on the same page when I say that it is in no way faster, easier, or more efficient to cook with children than not. But there are reasons we cook with children, right? We do it because it brings us closer together. We do it because we're teaching them something. And most importantly, we do it because together we're having this shared ownership over the pride of creating something. And at the end, you still get that turkey or that cake or whatever it is, and you all still get to enjoy it. When I switched from doing standard exhibit design to doing visitor collaboration and co-creation of exhibits, my job changed. I didn't get to come up with all the ideas anymore, to come up with the recipes and make the whole thing myself. I knew that the people I was working with, these community members, teenagers, whomever, were amateurs. They were not professional exhibit designers. And so I had to think about, how do we make a process that invites them to get in the kitchen with me? And my job changed to being that kind of facilitator. But the good news is that at the end, we still got a great exhibit every time, and we had more people who had been in the kitchen and been involved with it. I had to swallow some of my personal attachment to being in control of that whole process, but instead I got to facilitate an experience that brought a lot of people together and still created high-quality results. And that brings me to the second lesson I want to talk about, and that's how you design collaborative processes for co-creation with visitors. I want to start with a cautionary story. This is a story of a project that did not succeed. This is a project I did with a group of teenagers. The Smithsonian, the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics was doing an exhibit about black holes. And they decided they wanted to get some teenagers to develop some media pieces for this exhibit. And so they called out to California to this science center that had a great teen program and said, hey, could you help us with this? And the science center brought me in to work with these teens to build these pieces. These teens were fabulous, they were very smart, they were very motivated around science, but there was a fundamental problem with this project, which was the teenagers came in and they said, okay, we want to talk to the client, and great, we got them on the phone, and then the teenagers would say, well, what do you want? What do you want exhibits about? And the client would say, no, this is about what teenagers think about black holes, and we really want you to make something that's for teens, so we don't want to tell you what to do, we want this to be your authentic expression. And teens would say, okay, well, what colors are you using in the exhibit? And they'd say, no, don't worry about that. Just, make the look and feel authentic to you. And again, basically, we're treating these teenagers not like you would treat a professional, whether that be a colleague or a contractor or something like that, but the way that you would treat a program participant or somebody in a camp. And so here's what happened. First of all, these teenagers were very frustrated because they had never made an exhibit before, so with no constraints or criteria, they didn't know how to be successful. And quickly I learned that the more constraints I could give them, the more I could say, okay, here's a process, here are some deadlines, the more into it they got. This is one of my favorite photos from this project. These teenagers loved crossing off to-do lists. It was like their dream to have a clear list of things to do and to figure it out. And that's not to say they weren't creative, because they were, and they worked very hard. But in the end, the products they made did not make it into the exhibition. Not because they weren't good, they were very good, but they did not fit what the client wanted. Here's an example, I'm just showing a screenshot. This was a video piece called The Colbert Report. It was a takeoff on Stephen Colbert. And so this host, Stephanie Colbert, believes that the sun is going to turn to a black hole. She's very freaked out about this, and the whole 10-minute bit is about her interacting with scientists who say, no, the sun can't turn into a black hole. And she says, yes, we're all going to die. And, it keeps going like this. And the client watched this video with a frozen smile on their faces. And because for them, this kind of humor, even though they understood what the teenagers were trying to do, it was too edgy or too something for what they really thought about in their exhibition being. And all three of these projects were excellent, and they did reflect authentically what these teens thought was compelling around black holes, but ultimately for the client, that wasn't a match. And I think that this is a case where the process was not designed the way you design it if you were working with a subcontractor or if you were working with colleagues. And because of that, the end result was not something that could be seen as respectable and valid for the client.